Tonight we'll be picking up in Luke chapter 22. Luke chapter 22, verse 1 says, "Now the feast of the unleavened bread drew nigh, which is called the Passover. And the chief priests and scribes sought how they might kill him, for they feared the people." All right, so they're trying to plot a way to kill Jesus, but they're afraid of the multitude that's following Jesus. They're afraid they're going to face some opposition. Then entered Satan into Judas, surnamed Iscariot, being of the number of the 12. Okay, so this is Judas the disciple. And he went his way and communed with the chief priests and captains how he might betray him unto them. So there's a plot. We know the story, but let's talk about it a little bit. So Satan entered into Judas and convinced Judas to go and commune with these priests, the ones who were plotting to kill Jesus, and figure out a way that they might betray Jesus. And they were glad. This made them happy because their whole idea was, how are we going to get through these people? How are we going to get Jesus, trick him, whatever we have to do? How are we going to overcome the majority of these people? So they were glad, and they coveted it. They made a promise, they made a vow, and that to give him money. And he promised and sought opportunity to betray him unto them in the absence of the multitude. So he was by himself. Right? He slipped away. There was nobody else there. Nobody there to stop him or convince him otherwise. Then came the day of unleavened bread, when the Passover must be killed. And he sent Peter and John, saying, "Go and prepare us the Passover, that we may eat." And they said unto him, "Where wilt thou we prepare?" Where do you want us to set it up at? Where do you want us to get ready? And he said unto them, "Behold, when you are entered into the city, there shall a man meet you, bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house where he entereth in. And ye shall say unto the goodman of the house, the master say unto thee, Where is the guest chamber, where I shall eat the Passover with my disciples?" Now when I was reading that, it reminded me of a week before, when he made his entry into Jerusalem. Remember, maybe he sent the disciples that week to ask for the donkey. Remember? They had no idea where they were going. They were just going to find this colt tied up, and they were supposed to ask this colt owner, say the Lord had need of him. I wonder if he sent them in to do that week to show confidence. They would build confidence in his plan. They saw how that outcome happened, and now he's telling them the same thing. To go and see the man with the pitcher of water and tell them that we need your house. Right? Yeah. So then they're asking, where's the guest chamber? We're going to have a Passover. Where can we do this at? Where's the guest chamber? And he shall show you a large upper room furnished. There make ready. So he's telling them what to look for. And they went and found as he said unto them, and they made ready for the Passover. I think he was just building a little confidence in them the week before, showing them that he knows what's going on, he knows what's going to happen, and the way has already been prepared. And he said unto them, With desire, I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. There's his warning. I'm fixing to suffer. But all I really wanted to do was to eat this Passover feast with you. For I say unto you, I will not any more eat thereof, until it be fulfilled in the kingdom of God. And he took the cup and gave thanks and said, Take this and divide it among yourselves. For I say unto you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God shall come. And he took bread and gave unto them, and gave thanks and brake it, and gave unto them, saying, This is my body, which is given for you. This do in remembrance of me. Likewise also the cup after supper, saying, This cup is the New Testament in my blood, which is shed for you. But behold, the hand of him that betrayeth me is with me on the table. And truly the Son of Man goeth, as it was determined. But woe unto that man by whom he is betrayed. All right, there has been no public knowledge of what took place between Judas and the chief priest. There has been no body broken. There has been no blood shed yet. But Jesus is warning them of things to come. And here he says, the guy who has betrayed me, his hand is on this table with us. And he says here, as truly as the Son of Man goeth, as it was determined. This was the Father's will. This is the way things were supposed to be played out. But woe unto that man by whom he is betrayed. He's speaking of Judas here, right? Okay. And they began to inquire among themselves which of them it was that should do this thing. I wonder what Judas felt at this time. I wonder if he played stupid. You know, he knew it was him, but I was like, Peter, was it you? James, did you do it? John?
Well, he didn't want anybody to know it was going to be him.
Yeah, so he was just playing right along with him, right? And there was also a strife among them, which of them should be accounted the greatest. All right, so not only trying to figure out who betrayed Jesus, but now they're trying to figure out who's the best disciple. Who's his favorite? I know with two children it happens all the time. Who's the favorite? Well, Emma, you're my favorite daughter. Jake, you're my favorite son.
There you go.
And it's covered, right? But the disciples were, I don't know what went through their mind, what it even mattered. But they wanted a hierarchy. They wanted to know who was on top. And he said unto them, the King of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and they that exercise authority upon them are called benefactors. But ye shall not be so. But he that is greatest among you, let him be as the younger, and he that is chief, as he that doeth serve. For whether is greater, he that sitteth at meat, or he that serveth? Is not he that sitteth at the meat? But I am among you as he that serveth. Jesus says it plays no importance who the most important is. Here I am serving you while you sit to eat. Shouldn't I be the one sitting to eat and you be the one serving? But Jesus says, here I am still trying to teach you that our whole role is to serve. Ye are they which have continued with me in my temptations. Jesus says, you have been with me. Through all the trials, through all the testings, you have been with me. And I appoint unto you a kingdom, as my Father hath appointed unto me, that ye may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and sit on thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. He's promised them a kingdom, the same as his Father had promised him. Is it the same kingdom? Ta-da! Yes, it is. It's the same kingdom. And look what their responsibility is going to be. To judge the tribes of Israel. And the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. How did Jesus know that? Because he's all-knowing.
He knows everything.
I wonder what has happened in Peter's life that we are unaware of, that we do not have access to know, that the devil was trying to win Peter over. Was it the conversation of someone's betrayed me? Was it the argument over who's the greatest? Satan is in this room with them, causing this chaos. I wonder what else has happened in Peter's life that Peter may have picked up on some clues that Satan was trying to do these things. But look at Peter's response. And he said unto him, Lord, I am ready to go with thee, both into prison and to death. So Peter's kind of confident, right? Lord, I've been with you the whole time. I'm ready. I'll go to jail. I'll die for you. And he said, I tell thee, Peter, the cock shall not crow this day before that shalt thrice deny that thou knowest me. So before the sun comes up, you're going to deny me 3 times. And he said unto them, when I sent you without purse and scrip and shoes, lacked ye anything? And they said nothing. So remember when he sent them out, told them not to take anything with them? He's reminding them. He's, once again, like we talked this morning, he's trying to rebuild faith in these disciples. Jesus knows that what's fixing to take place is probably going to cause a whole lot of chaos. The disciples were going to be just heartbroken and devastated. But he says, remember this. I think that's one reason why he allowed them these experiences, so that they could draw from them. Just like we talked about this morning, he allows us these experiences so we can learn from them, that we can learn to trust in him. He says, but you lack nothing. And they said, no. Then said he unto them, but now he that hath a purse, let him take it. And likewise his scrip, and he that hath no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. For I say unto you that this that is written must yet be accomplished in me. As he was reckoned among the transgressors, for the things concerning me have an end. And they said, Lord, behold, here are 2 swords. And he said unto them, it is enough. Okay, so what does that say? They have everything they need, right? There's no need for them to sell their coat. There's enough swords. And he came out and went as he was wont to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples also followed him. And he said and when he was at the place, he said unto them, pray that you enter not into temptation. And as he was withdrawn from them about a stone's cast, he kneeled down and prayed, saying, Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. The cup of crucifixion. The responsibility that the Lord has placed on him to be that sacrifice. Jesus is showing a little bit of humanity here. I think that even though he was fully God, he was still fully man, and he was still feeling the emotional side that a human being would feel, and saying, Lord, let this cup pass from me. But then he immediately switches gears. Just a slight hesitation, he said, nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. The disciples were only a stone's throw away. They had to hear this conversation. They had to hear this prayer. Knowing that Jesus was there to fulfill his Father's will. Even though death was coming, he still wanted his Father's will to be fulfilled. And there appeared an angel unto him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in an agony, he prayed more earnestly. And his sweat was as it were great drops of blood falling down to the ground. All right, the angel came first, right? Because I believe this deep type of prayer would have diminished his power. This angel came to strengthen him, to give him this power. This angel that he's speaking of here is the Holy Ghost. It's praying for Jesus. And imagine his intensity in this prayer. I mean, have anybody ever prayed until they sweated? Not because they were praying so hard. Maybe the room temperature was hot, or it was hot outside and you were praying. But he prayed so hard that he began to sweat. And he was so concentrated and focused that I believe he was busting the blood vessels in his head, causing blood drops to fall. That's how in tune he was with God. And when he rose up from prayer and was come to his disciples, he found them sleeping for sorrow. All right, could you imagine? Have you ever gone through something and been so depressed that you just didn't really feel like doing anything? And the only place you could find any comfort was just sleeping? That's where the disciples are at. They are sleeping because of sorrow. And he said unto them, why sleep ye? Rise and pray, lest ye enter into temptation. Once again, he's reminding them to stay away from the temptation, right? Could you imagine what the disciples saw when they woke up? Remember, Jesus is standing over them. And the last picture we were given of him was there were drops of blood on his head. Right? That has scared me to death. And then just like this, and while yet he spake, he's still talking with them. Behold, a multitude, and he that was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them, and drew near unto Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said unto him, Judas, betrayest thou the Son of Man with a kiss? When they which were about him saw what would follow, they said unto him, Lord, shall we smite with the sword? And one of them smote the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. We all know that to be Peter. Okay? Wonder why Luke left that out. Does it matter?
Not really.
Just, I wonder why. Luke being so descriptive in his writing, why he left that out. I think the focus was on the betrayal. I think his focus was on Judas's betrayal. Because he says, Judas, thou betrayed me with a kiss. It was almost like Judas was trying to get some comfort from the guilt that he was feeling when he kissed Jesus on his face. I remember when I used to get in trouble. Well, Mama would tear my hide up. And so that I'd feel comfort, I'd always want to go get a kiss, just so I know that everything was all right, that Mama had forgiven me and everything was all right. I wonder if Judas was doing that. I don't know. But Jesus called him on it. And he just told him, he said, shall we smite him with the sword? And one of them did it. And Jesus answered and said, suffer ye thus far. And he touched his ear and healed him. He's teaching the disciples about forgiveness.
Why did Jesus tell them that 2 swords was enough?
What do you think? What do you think?
Well, I think that they were not used as swords in this instance.
Had the swords been necessary, they would all had one, right? You think?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good point, Norman. And then he's teaching them about forgiveness. Right here. This man is fixing to put Jesus in chains. But he reaches down, picks up the piece of ear, places it back, and his ear is made whole. Suffer ye thus far. This is all you're going to suffer. You have been healed. Then Jesus said unto the chief priests and captains of the temple and the elders which were come to him, but ye come out against a thief with swords and staves. When I was daily with you in the temple, you stretched forth no hands against me. But this your hour and power of darkness. Why didn't they do this in the temple? Yeah. They would know who it was. One, there was always a multitude with him. Remember, it started out that way. They were worried about the people. But now here it is in the hour of darkness, and they're gaining their power from the darkness, their comfort in the darkness. Most crimes are done under the cover of darkness.
Well, see, won't nobody with Jesus but the disciples.
Just the disciples, right? Just how many now? 11. Judas was there, but we know he was on the other side, right?
Yep.
Then they took him and led him and brought him into the high priest's house, and Peter followed afar off. So Peter was following from a distance. Now, had Peter been willing to go to prison, had Peter been willing to die, don't you think he would have been right there with them?
Right up there in the thick.
Don't you think? I would have. But he followed from a distance. And when they had kindled a fire in the midst of the hall and were sat down together, Peter sat down among them. Here's why he stayed afar off. He let them get the fire built, and then he slipped up and sat down with them. Kind of like I wasn't with him. He stayed a piece off, so he was in fear of his life. But a certain maid beheld him as he sat by the fire. So this woman looked at Peter while he's sitting by the fire and earnestly looked upon him. She studied him. She looked at his face, the flicker of the fire, and she studied his face and said, this man was also with him. So she put him on the spot. I don't know how many people's around this fire, but she's put Peter on the spot. Here he is. He stayed a piece off. Now he's eased up into the crowd. sitting by the fire, and this one woman notices Peter. And look, he denied him, saying, "Woman, I know him not." Time one, right? I wonder what's going through Peter's mind now. I wonder if he's remembering that conversation. Remember old bold and brazen Peter said, "Lord, I'll go to prison. I'll die for you." Denial number one. And after a little while, another saw him and said, "Thou art also of him." And Peter said, "Man, I am not." Twice. And then about an hour later, and about the space of 1 hour after, another confidently affirmed, saying, "Of a truth, this fellow also was with him, for he is Galilean." And Peter said, "Man, I know not what thou sayest." And immediately while he spake, the cock crowed. Wow.
3 times.
That's 3 times, right? 1, 2, 3, and then the rooster crowed. I wonder if the recollection of that conversation, because you got to remember, let's not beat up on Peter. It's easy to beat up on Peter because we have all the information, right? We've heard this story. We know what happens. But there has been a lot gone on since that conversation. Peter said, "Yes, I'll go to jail with you. I'll die with you." Jesus says, "Nope. Before the cock crows before the cock crows, you'll deny me 3 times." Then after that, they go to pray. They hear Jesus saying this in the garden, praying to the Father, "Let thy cup pass from me. If not, let thy will be done." Okay, they're heartbroken. They fall into a sleep. They wake up. Bam, here's the multitude. There's an attack going on. Peter cuts the man's ear off. There's a lot going on in Peter's mind. Maybe for a moment, with all this chaos and clutter going on in Peter's mind, he forgot the conversation. I wonder the first time he probably didn't remember it. But I can guarantee you that when that rooster crowed, it came back to his mind.
Oh, I think so too.
And now I wonder what devastation he's feeling. I wonder how hard he's going to, what kind of beating he is going to take. Look at verse 62. And Peter went out and wept bitterly. Why don't you think he cried the first time? Or the second time? But it was the third time that he cried.
Well, in 61, it says the Lord turned and looked at him. That had to do something to him.
And then it says, and Peter remembered the word. That's why he didn't cry the first and second time. He had forgotten. That's sometimes a picture of us when we get caught up in sin sometimes. And we'll sin and we'll willfully sin. And it doesn't affect us. And then later on we'll sin some more and it doesn't affect us. And it's not until we realize, until that conviction comes. And I think that's what Peter was feeling when the Lord looked at him, that look of conviction. And then we remember what it was that we had done. It says, and Peter remembered the word of the Lord and how he had said unto him, before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. And Peter went out and wept bitterly. I skipped that verse, I'm sorry. And the men that held Jesus mocked him and smote him. So here it goes. The beating's fixing to take place, and we're going to make it through. So Peter run off. Why is he leaving again? Remember, he stayed the peace off during the arrest. Now he's leaving again. And here they go to beat Jesus. Mock him, beat him. When they had blindfolded him, why did they do that? You think they didn't want him to know who was beating them?
Of course.
Or think about this. How troubling is it when you can't see something? We're so used to seeing things. You know why the best wreck to be in is one you don't know is coming? Your body tenses up and you usually get hurt more than you would if you don't know the wreck's coming.
first, and it's not right.
But now here Jesus is, used to seeing everything. Now knowing who he is, he knows what's coming anyway. Blinded or not, he knows what's coming and where the hits are coming from. But they blindfolded him and struck him on the face. I think in their mind, they didn't want him to know who it was. And asked him, saying, prophesy. Who is it that smote thee? Oh, they are mocking him as hard as they can. Who did it? Tell me who did that. Son of God. Prophesy about this. That's what they're doing. They're mocking him. And many other things blasphemously spake they against him. And as soon as it was day, the elders of the people and the chief priest and the scribes came together and led him into their council, saying, Art thou the Christ? Tell us. And he said unto them, If I tell you, you will not believe. All right, so here he is being beaten. He's being blindfolded, punched in the face, mocked, scornfully mocked, saying, Tell us, prophesy. Oh, wise one, I can hear their sarcasm. Prophesy. And all the other blasphemous things that they had done. And look what he says. He still says, he's still challenging them. Because the easy answer would have been, I'm not the Christ. Or I am the Christ. But he says, if I tell you, you're not going to believe it anyway. So why waste my breath? And if I also ask you, you will not answer me, nor let me go. Hereafter shall the Son of Man sit on the right hand of the power of God. So when you're finished, he answered their question without answering their question the way that they wanted. He said, whenever you're finished with me, or whenever my Father's will is complete, I shall sit at the right hand of God, or the power of God. Then said they all, Art thou the Son of God? He knows he's not getting anywhere with it. And he said unto them, Ye say that I am. And they said, What need we any further witness? For we ourselves have heard of his own mouth. All right. You see what they've done here? They were looking for a reason to arrest Jesus. Up until this point, and really even after this point, there is no valid reason. But because they do not believe that he is the Son of God, and because he is professing to be, they need a witness. Remember, I just can't take Michael to court. There has to be 2 or 3 witnesses to verify my charges against Michael. That's what they were trying to do here, was gain or trick Jesus, strip him up into saying that he was the Son of God. He never said it. He said, you say that I am. And look what happens. It says, and they said, it's been accomplished. We don't have to go any further because every single one of us have heard what he said with our own ears, out of his own mouth. So it wasn't like they were getting secondhand information from the multitude of people that was following Jesus. They wasn't getting what the disciples' testimony was of Jesus. They got it from his own mouth, or they perceived to have gotten it from his own mouth. But look what he said. All he said was, you say that I am. He never, ever gave them space or a place to find fault. Right? So the ball is still in their court. We'll go on because 23 is a long one too. And we'll just pick up and finish 23 and 24 on Wednesday, okay? Because it's getting kind of good right here. And the whole multitude of them arose and led him unto Pilate. So now he's got a whole multitude of witnesses against him that's going to plead their case in front of Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, we found this fellow perverting the nation. What nation? The nation of Israel. and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ a king. That's not what he said. Remember what he told Peter? To render unto Caesar? Remember? He said that. He never ever said nothing against Caesar. But they were trying to present the picture that Jesus thought he was above Caesar. They were trying to gain points with Caesar. Or with Pilate for Caesar. And Pilate asked him, saying, Art thou the king of the Jews? And he answered him and said, Thou sayest. Or what do you say? Then said Pilate to the chief priest and to the people, If I find no fault in this man. He answered the question the same way he did for the multitude. He answered it to Pilate the same way. And Pilate found no fault. And they were the more fierce. Oh, that fired him up even more. Saying, He stirreth up the people, teaching throughout all Jewry, beginning from Galilee to this place. When Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked whether the man were a Galilean. And as soon as he knew that he belonged unto Herod's jurisdiction, he sent for Herod, who himself also was at Jerusalem at that time. All right, so you see what Pilate's done. He shifted responsibility. Since this guy was a Galilean, he falls under Herod's rule. That'd be like if I got arrested in North Carolina, but South Carolina had an arrest warrant for me, and it was of greater charges. North Carolina is probably going to release me to South Carolina, let me stand trial for that. They wanted South Carolina to deal with that because North Carolina don't want to jail me. They want to go through all the financial responsibility. But Pilate here, he just didn't want the responsibility. He didn't want it on his hands. So he found a way out. He said, well, this is Herod's citizen. Let Herod judge him. And just so happened, Herod was at Jerusalem at the same time. And when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceeding glad, for he was desirous to see him of a long season, because he had heard many things of him, and hoped to have seen some miracle done by him. Now, he didn't want to see him because he thought he was the Son of God. He wasn't happy to see him because he had just seen God in the flesh. He wanted to see what he could do. Then he questioned with him in many words, but he answered him nothing. So Herod's asking Jesus a whole lot of questions. Jesus didn't respond. And the chief priests and scribes stood vehemently accused him. All right, now think about this. Here Herod is a man of authority. And he's speaking to Jesus, asking questions with an expectation of getting answers. He's got to be a little bit hotter in the collar, right? If Mark is asking me questions and expecting an answer and I don't answer him, it's going to make him mad. He's going to get madder and madder and madder. And then you got somebody else over here, it says, and vehemently accusing him. There was some authority in their accusations. That's going to fire Herod up even more, right? It's just going to add kindling to the fire. And Herod with his men of war set him at naught, and mocked him, and arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him again to Pilate. So Herod jumped on board, didn't he, with the mockery. He put him in a fine robe and sent him back to Pilate. And the same day Pilate and Herod were made friends together, for before they were at enmity between themselves. So now they've joined ranks. There was some arguing going on between Herod and Pilate. But whatever transpired that day, they became friends. You see that? And Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers of the people, said unto them, Ye have brought this man unto me as one that perverteth the people. And behold, I, having examined him before you, have found no fault in this man, touching those things whereof ye accuse him. Everything he's been accused of, Herod has found no evidence to convict him. No, nor yet Herod. Herod didn't even find anything. For I sent you to him, and lo, nothing worthy of death is done unto him or done by him. I will therefore chastise him and release him. So Jesus was going to get a beating. When what Pilate's eyes were and what he saw, whatever Jesus had done didn't deserve death, but maybe just some chastisement. And he was going to get a whipping at the whipping post. For of necessity, he must release one unto them at the feast. So, because of tradition, at the feast, one of the guilty had the right to be released. And they cried out all at once, saying, Away with this man, and release unto us Barabbas. So they pulled deep into their tricks, didn't they? Their bag of tricks. They reached in and said, well, you got to let somebody go today. And release Barabbas and take Jesus. Who for a certain sedition made in the city for murder and was cast into prison. So Barabbas was a murderer. He had killed people. Pilate, therefore, willing to release Jesus, spake again to them. So now Pilate is pleading Jesus' case. But they cried, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. And he said unto them the third time. See that number 3?
Yeah.
Just reading that, you wouldn't catch it, but remember the importance of the number of 3. And he said unto them the third time, Why? What evil hath he done? I have found no cause of death in him. I will therefore chastise him and let him go. And they were insistent with loud voices, requiring that he might be crucified. And the voices of them and of the chief priest prevailed. You ever seen those arguments where people think whoever's the loudest has the most say-so? We see it. If you can't have an argument at this tone, something's wrong. I think you can disagree in this type of tone here and still get a point across. You don't have to scream and holler. Well, that's what happened. And their voices outweighed the voice of Pilate. Now, because we know the story, we know that it was God's will that their voice outweighed. But Pilate was in control over this land. It was his call. He was the judge. And he found no fault. But yet he allowed the loud voice to influence him. Do we see that today? We allow the loud voice of the people to influence what this nation does, or what a group of people does. And that's what took place here. And Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they required. So Pilate found him guilty, because that's what the people demanded. And he released unto them him that for sedition and murder was cast into prison, whom they had desired. But he delivered Jesus to their will. And as they led him away, they laid hold upon one Simon, a Cyrenian, coming out of the country, and on him they laid the cross, that he might bear it after Jesus. That he may bear the cross for Jesus. And there followed him a great company of people and of women, which also bewailed and lamented him. But Jesus, turning unto them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. See, there is still a large crowd of people crying and praying. That's what lamenting is. Crying and praying for Jesus. And look, he stops him and says, don't cry for me. Cry for your children. Cry for yourselves and for your children. It says, For behold, the days are coming in which they shall say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bare, and the paps which never gave suck. They shall begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things in a green tree, what shall be done in the dry? What's he saying? Anybody have any idea what he's saying there?
He's warning them about things to come.
Exactly. He's warning them about his wrath that's fixing to fall upon the earth at some point in time.
Falling on the United States right now.
It sure is.
And people don't see it.
It sure is. In more ways than one, brother. And there were also 2 other malefactors led with him to be put to death. And when they were come to the place which is called Calvary, there they crucified him and the malefactors, one on the right and the other on the left. Then said Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they parted his raiment and cast lots. So they divided up his clothes and pretty much drew straws to see who they were gambling for his garments, to see who would win the garments of Christ. And the people stood beholding, looking, watching. And the rulers also with them derided him, saying, He saved others, still mocking, let him save himself, if he be the Christ, the chosen of God. And the soldiers also mocked him, coming to him and offering him vinegar, and saying, If thou be the King of Jews, save thyself. And a superscription also was written over him in letters of Greek and Latin and Hebrew. Why? So everyone there would know what the sign said. This is the King of the Jews. And one of the malefactors which were hanged railed on him, saying, If thou be the Christ, save thyself and us. So he's mocking Jesus from the cross as well. But the other answering rebuked him, saying, Doest thou fear God, seeing that thou art in the same condemnation? And we indeed justly. He's saying we deserve this condemnation, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man hath done nothing amiss, or nothing wrong. And he said unto Jesus, Lord, remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom. And Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be with me in paradise. And it was about the 6th hour, and there was a darkness over all the earth until the 9th hour. So about 3-hour span here. The sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was rent in the midst. And when Jesus had cried with a loud voice, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And having said thus, he gave up the ghost. Now when the centurion saw what was done, he glorified God, saying, Certainly this was a righteous man. And all the people that came together to that sight, behold the things which were done, smote their breasts and returned. They beat on their chest and returned. And all his acquaintance and the women that followed him from Galilee stood afar off, beholding these things. So verse 48, they're pounding their chest in victory. Right? We've seen a football player get a touchdown. You know what I'm saying? That's what they're doing. They're beating on their chest as a sign of victory or success. And behold, there was a man named Joseph, a counselor, and he was a good man and just. The same had not consented to the counsel and deed of them. All right, so here's Joseph of Arimathea, right? He was in the council, but he did not side with them. He was one of the few that did not side with them. He was of Arimathea, a city of the Jews, who also himself waited for the kingdom of God. So he believed. He was saved, right? He believed who Christ said he was. This man went unto Pilate and begged the body of Jesus. All right. Because of his position in the council, he was able to approach Pilate. Probably because of his position in the council, Pilate saw who he was, knew who he was, and released the body because of his position. Anybody else couldn't have just walked there and said, we beg of the body. But because of Joseph's position, Pilate gave him the body. Verse 53 says, and he took it down, and we will finish. and wrapped it in linen, and laid it in a sepulchre that was hewn in stone, wherein never man laid before was laid. Okay, that part is important. Okay? This was Joseph's family tomb. Okay, it wasn't just like we do today. When we buy a cemetery plot, that is for one person. But this tomb was his family tomb. So everybody that was in Joseph's family that passed away would be buried in this family tomb. Okay, now think about this. If this tomb had been used before, there would be evidence of bodies in that tomb. So it would be much easier to say that that's not Jesus' body, or that that's Jesus' body, if there was other bones in there. You know what I'm saying? They would have a way to explain the missing body of Christ. But this tomb had not been used before. That's why that's in there. Because there was no other person ever in this tomb. And that day was the preparation, and the Sabbath drew on. And the women also, which came with him from Galilee, followed after, and beheld the sepulchre, and how his body was laid. And they returned and prepared spices and ointments, and rested the Sabbath day, according to the commandment. Okay, so what have they done? Joseph has pleaded for the body. Pilate gave him the body. It was laid in an empty tomb. The ladies that were with him watched this, observed everything, and then they went home. And when they went home, look what they did. They prepared spices and ointments. What were they doing with that?
They don't
Put
put it
on
in
the
the
body
body.
to keep it from smelling.
To keep it from smelling. That was a burial tradition. They didn't have embalming like we do today. They would rub his body. Guess what they would rub his body with?
The same one.
Frankincense and myrrh.
Oh.
Ho ho! What did Jesus receive when he was born?
Frankincense and myrrh.
You see how it all... Now that we know that, isn't it, that's kind of an aha moment.
Right, yeah.
Even at his birth, they were preparing for his death. And yes, those were fine spices, and they were used for other things. But that's what they used for burial, or for body preparation for burial, was frankincense and myrrh. It's pretty ironic, isn't it? It's neat how God looked that far ahead and told those wise men to bring these gifts. And little did we know that it was just a prophecy, really, of what was going to happen to Jesus.
That's right.
All right, that wraps up 22 and 23. We will pick up in 24 on Wednesday evening. I hope everyone has a great week.
You have one too.
I hope I do too. We hope for no rain.
So 24, let's all
24.
remember 24.
Vicki, put your bookmark in 24.
The last one.
That's the last.
That's the last one, and
Oh,
we have
is
not.
it the last one?
Yes.
Right.
So I reckon on Wednesday evening after service we will discuss which direction we want to go.